candidate in the Democratic Party. It is Daria Devlin. Welcome, Daria. Glad to have you on.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
All righty. Why don't we start with a little bit of, your origin story and why you're running?
My origin story. I'm like a superhero today.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Joel, people ask me why I'm running, and I think the easiest thing for me to say is this. I love Erie. I love everything about Erie. And when I announced my campaign back in November, one of the things I said was, all of the best and strongest things about me have come from this city. So I was born and raised on the Lower East Side, the historic East Bayfront, down there on Front and German. I went to Piper Burley School, went through our public schools, went to Academy High School before it closed, and then graduated from Central. Went away to college. I met my husband up there at Colgate University. But when it was time to be a grown-up and think about, where I wanted to land, I said to my husband, I want to be in Erie. And, my dad had always taught me from a really young age that Erie's a place where you can make a difference. It's small enough where you can have impact, and it's a place where, you can really change things and you can have an impact. So moved back to Erie after college. My husband finished law school, and, I've seen what's happening in our city, and there's good things. Like it's like all the pieces are there. But I really believe we're at a pivotal moment and we need leadership. And I don't see it. And I'm the first one to tell you, and we'll talk about it more. I think Joe Schember is a very, very good and kind man. I have not one bad thing to say about him. I just believe it's time for change.
Okay, so leadership, that's an action-packed word. I want you to define it as you see it.
Absolutely. So leadership is action to me. And so when I think about my own career and why I'm qualified, and I want to say this, change for change's sake, not that important. It's sexy. It might be, it's something new, but I'm not a big fan of that. But change when you have someone qualified, I think that's really something to consider. And I'm qualified for this position because in every single thing I've done in my career, I have been a problem solver. I have acted. I have seen an issue. One example of that is most recently over at, the Old Wayne School. We did that project. We saw a need. We were committed. We worked really, really hard, and we made it happen. And I know that I have the skills to do, and that's what leadership is for me. Seeing problems, talking with folks, understanding what we need to do, and acting.
Leadership is also having people be able to follow you.
Yep.
And one of the things that seems to be, if I can have a critique of the public sector, is that sometimes we have, folks that, just kind of are solo agents, if you will.
Yes.
How do you feel like you could build a team and a coalition, especially considering that there's even though, let's say, the city is mostly Democratic, there's a lot of slices to the Democratic pie.
And what have we seen recently in politics,
Yes.
right? Nothing, we can't count on anything anymore. And even as a Democrat, I would say I need to be walking out here and talking to everybody of every background. Of course, only the Dems can vote for me in the primary, but I hope I'm successful. And then we have a bigger conversation. And I think in the Democratic Party, for one thing, we need to build a big tent. And so, in my own kind of journey as a Democrat, I would say I'm an Obama Democrat in the sense that, we need to make room for everybody here. The older folks who have been Dems for a long time, kind of the more traditional, the younger progressives.
I call them the Tullio Democrats.
The Tullio Dems, yeah, for sure. The younger progressives, the folks in the middle who just want to see a better life for themselves and their families. And I guess, Joel, if you're asking me, what it means to lead in that way, you got to do a lot of listening. You got to do a lot of listening and learning, probably listen more, talk less kind of thing. And that's really the kind of person I am. I just enjoy sitting down, having those conversations, hearing where folks are coming from and listening to both sides. Recently I had a conversation around housing. You and I'll probably talk about that today. But, the landlords have issues and concerns. Renters certainly do. We need to listen on all sides and then create a strategy that we can all get behind and act. And I think really that's how we do this. We lead, we act, and we make sure that we're leading everybody along with us. We're bringing them with us. And I guess the last thing too, we'll communicate. One of the things I'm really not seeing from City Hall right now is that transparency. I mean, physically, it's tough to get in that building. And of course, I know there's reasons for that. But,
right.
If you go to the website, if you have people in leadership need to be able to communicate clearly the vision, the action, where we're going. And I don't see a lot of that. I think that's something else I could really bring to the position.
Talk a bit about that position of mayor, because, again, staying with the leadership lane, if you will, part of leadership, too, is not just your team that you would have in the executive branch, but also making a salient pitch, a salient idea for the legislative branch. And another critique is, one of the things I'm not seeing is this ability for the city to be all on the same page. You have I won't call it strife, but you have disagreements on city council, and you have a lot of different things going on there.
And you're always going to have that, right? So
right.
I mean that's, of course, that's going to happen. But here's a couple things I think about the position. Number one, the mayor needs to be the chief cheerleader for the city. So it needs to be the mayor who's the one, having conversations with potential business owners, having conversations with developers, sitting across the table and saying, look, here's why I want you to come to my city. Here's what we'll do for you. And here's why I think you'll be successful here. That's number one. Number two, the mayor needs to be the chief advocate. And when I say advocate, I mean in Harrisburg, I mean in DC, I mean here in town. The mayor needs to understand the vision and communicate that vision and advocate clearly for it. And I also believe the mayor needs to be the one to bring folks together around issues. So let's just talk, housing, of course, but let's just talk about youth development, for example.
Okay.
A couple years ago, we had, some youth violence issues, certainly in our schools. We had a shooting not that long ago at Erie High. I remember feeling like, I want the mayor to stand up and lead on this issue. Bring the folks together around the table and say, look, everybody, I don't have all the answers, but we're all going to sit here today and figure it out. That convening element, too, a really big part of the job. And I think that's how we really get things done in the city.
And you're just not seeing that from this current administration.
A wonderful, kind man. And the administration works so hard. I mean, by all accounts, hardworking folks. I just think we need a little more action. And again, that really straightforward vision and some energy, to be honest.
You said you're willing to take phone calls. I think we're going to get them. Hi, you're live on Talk Erie with Daria Devlin.
Hi, Joel. I'm calling specifically for you. I listen to your radio show a lot, and I just want you to know, in my mind, you're the ad hoc mayor of Erie. You kind of keep it going, no matter who's in office. So,
okay, thank you.
Kudos to you.
What a compliment.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. Bye-bye. There
you go. Well,
all
Joel,
right,
if you're running, you should tell me.
No, not a chance. Not a chance. Anyway, no, I mean, this concept of convening and being up front. And again, just a little side note. We have an hour, so
sure.
I won't take too much time. But, I read a lot of the old newspapers, and we had an energy crisis in the 70s. I don't know how old, if you remember those. You were probably a young one, but I missed 14 days of school my freshman year at Mercer's Prep because there was an energy crisis and we had sub-zero weather, and they were shutting everything down. The only people that were open were Prep because they had the steam heat from the Penelec plant, right? And of course, Father Dollinger wasn't going to let him go home. Anyway, Mayor Tullio was like 4 different places on that newspaper when they had that critical blizzard and all the horrible things. Not, again, with all due respect to our mayor, I didn't see that necessarily on our recent Snowmageddon here. It was really actually the county executive that took the lead there. You're feeling like even the symbolism of that is important. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It is. I mean, let me say it this way. The leader needs to lead from the front, right? So especially in a time of crisis, especially in a time when people are feeling very uncertain. You know, I talked to some folks down in even the frontier area who said to me they were older and they were really afraid during those days, you know, during Snowmageddon.
Yeah.
You know, emergency services couldn't get down. They couldn't get out. That's really a fearful time. And I think it's in those moments that people need to see a leader who's strong, who's communicating, who's visible. You know, I joked with folks, man, I would have been riding around on those plows and telling people where we were. You know, we can't just communicate via Facebook. We need to be on the televisions, talking to people, out in the neighborhoods, having those conversations. It's reassuring to people. And I didn't see that in this most recent crisis.
Yeah. So leadership obviously is a key there. The convening of it, certainly advocacy goes beyond just just kind of words. How do you do deals for Erie?
Yeah, talk about Lou Tullio, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, again, there was not a federal politician he didn't like, Republican, Democrat, or whatever, right? As long as he can get money from them.
Because if you're the mayor of Erie, your job is to bring it home for Erie, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter what that takes. And I guess I would say this, we have advocacy. I mean, look, we have lovely legislators who are working hard in Harrisburg, our state legislators. I know that we have PACs, the chamber is advocating for us and Erie Insurance is advocating for us. At the end of the day, it is the mayor's job to go down and have the conversation in the governor's office, in the leader's office, leader to leader in executive branches to say, this is what my community needs. For example, I saw when Kamala Harris came and the mayor met her plane, and I joked, I said, man, if that were me, I would say, nice to meet you. Let me tell you all the things that we need here in Erie, right? Because
Right.
You get that opportunity. That's what you need to do. Because again, every move you make needs to be about making our community better, knowing the needs and stating clearly, articulating how that person can help.
But you would acknowledge, though, that they've been very prominent with the amount of grants that they've been able to receive
absolutely
in the city.
Absolutely.
Right?
The amount of grant writing is great. I mean, I really, really commend them for that work. One thing I will say, a little worry I have about grants, I was a grant writer back at the Erie School District.
Yeah.
You got to be careful with grants that you don't use them to plug budgets and then find later on that now we don't have sustainable funds. I haven't seen a lot of that. I mean, they're using grants really for infrastructure, one-time purchases, fire engines and things, which of course we should be doing. But we want to be cautious that we're really focusing on sustainable revenue sources, not just kind of one-time money.
Talking to Daria Devlin. She's running in the Democratic primary. We'll take a quick break here. Back in 90 seconds. It's a Joel Natale show on Talk Erie. Daria Devlin's our guest. She's taking phone calls at 814-679-1080. We're talking about her race in the Democratic primary for the city of Erie mayor. And so I did ask you why you're running. I'd like to spend some time on what are your themes of your campaign. What do you feel like your key bullet points that you're trying to get through here?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking, Joel. So we talked a little bit even before we started, and it's probably not going to come as any surprise, but housing is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got a real housing challenge in the city of Erie. The work that I've done, you know, on one end of the continuum around homelessness, you know, kind of in my day job and my professional work, but we've got challenges all the way through. We've got challenges in affordable housing. We've got challenges in, you know, I would say senior housing. So I really think if Erie is going to be this place that we know it all can be, where we can attract new employers and we can have good business and we can have people who are really making a go of it for themselves and their families, we got to address the housing problem first.
Here's the confusing point of this is that we're known as this affordable place to live. You can raise a family here. Yet when push comes to shove, when especially our kids, like our millennials, right, they're trying to make to jump from the rentals to a house. They can't find anything that's decent. The interest rates are out of whack. You know, it's 7-8% sometimes. You know, we haven't really built anything that's quality housing and affordable. And so we're hearing that, okay, to build a new house, it's $400,000.
Right.
Well, what 33-year-old millennial, even if they're making close to six figures, is going to be able to pull that off?
Right.
You know?
So we've got, you know, first of all, let's just say the housing stock in cities like Erie, and certainly in Erie, is old. I mean, we have very, very aging stock. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that's a significant cause for concern. Then we have a lot of deferred maintenance because homeowners, you know, have fallen behind. We know that, you know, our median income here in Erie is not what it needs to be and not where it is across the state. So people don't have the funds they need to renovate their homes. And, you know, one really interesting issue that I heard about and now I'm really seeing is we have, because of this shortage of really quality senior living. And I don't mean assisted living. I just mean independent senior living, you know, a condo that as you age, you can buy. I think what I'm hearing is we have seniors who are staying in their homes really longer than they'd like to because there's nowhere for them to go.
Right.
And so then, in essence, they kind of clog up the market because they're in these lovely starter homes, you know, that they've probably owned for 50 years themselves. And so, again, it's all connected, but we really need to sit with our residents and figure out, you know, do we need new construction? Do we need more money? You know, there was that great whole homes program that the city had for a while that the state funded. You know, we need to advocate, I think, for more of that. We got a lot of roofs that need to be repaired. We need to go in and take down the blight. And last thing I'll say, great work happened in the downtown. Right. I mean, the market, you know, housing, luxury housing, we need to shove that now into the neighborhoods. It can't just be downtown. We need to push all of that investment and all of that real resurgence into our neighborhoods. That's the next step.
Yeah, it's hard for me to understand, and I understand it's a different time, but, you know, the Baldwin brothers built a bazillion homes along very nice tree-lined streets, both on the west side and the east side. You know, a lot of us are in neighborhoods that are, you know, one Baldwin building after another. And that was the way that working class people were able to get into their 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, and then they expanded from there.
And, you know, I mean, everyone knows that home ownership is the key to generational wealth. And that's why when we have such low numbers of, you know, of Black families that are able to own homes, even in our own, you know, even outside the minority communities, low home ownership, this is how families really get their start and how they build that generational wealth. We've got to deal with this issue. And by the way, if we're ever going to get our population numbers back up, which is a 100%. Huge issue, we got to have housing for people to live in.
Let's get another phone call here. Hi, you're live with Daria Devlin on the Joel Natale Show.
Hello, is this me?
Yeah, you're live. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Okay, so it was interesting that you brought up the big snowstorm, and I guess my question would be, if you were to become mayor, obviously nobody can control our weather. However, when we were hit with that massive snowstorm in November, we did not have enough snowplow crews, and so private contractors were called in to help out, and many of us business owners had hired those private contractors, and what had happened was they were so busy trying to help the city that we could not get our private businesses plowed, and our employees could not go to work for 4 days.
Wow.
And the problem is that many of my customers are from South Carolina or California, and they don't care or even know about our issues. So what would you do to alleviate that situation coming forth?
Yeah.
I'm going to have her answer off the line. Thanks so much for the call. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a really good one. First of all, preparedness, right? So, we need to be making sure that we are prepared. And as the world changes and, climate changes, we need to be prepared for anything. So preparedness first. Secondly, infrastructure. So a lot of what I heard, we were seeing our plows getting stuck. They weren't able to do what we needed them to do. And
dozens and dozens of chains broken.
Right.
I mean,
and I want to say, if you know anybody who works for the city of Erie, those folks were killing themselves over those days, but they could only go as far as the infrastructure and the plows were taking them. So, one of the things I'd like to talk about in this campaign is, where did all that ARP money go that we got from, during COVID from the federal government? What infrastructure improvements could have been made in things like plows to make sure that we are ready for these kinds of things? Because all that equipment is expensive. We need to make sure when we have one-time money, whether it is grants or whether it is COVID funds, that we've almost completely deployed now, that we're making those investments in infrastructure. So really, again, can't say enough about the workers, but I think our equipment, we really need to take a look at that and be prepared.
It was the day after Thanksgiving. And one of the big scuttlebutts in Harrisburg right now is, when do we start hunting season? And so you literally had teams of workers that earned their vacation. They took their vacation around Thanksgiving, and we get hosed by Snowmageddon. Can't blame the workers, but you do need that plan B. Gotta be prepared.
Again, we live in Erie, Pennsylvania. We know snow is coming, so we need to be better prepared, and I hope we will be better prepared next time.
What do you think, as far as city infrastructure, is the big hole?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we see our streets right now. Now all the snow is going, and so we're all feeling those potholes. We know that's a huge expense every single year. I mean, I've had some conversations, sewers and water lines. I mean, these are going to be huge investments, particularly with sewer and wastewater treatment. I mean, these are big numbers that are coming. We've seen that our power grid is not all that stable, had some issues there. And then, of course, let's just talk about, important things like broadband, which is utilities now that we all count on. So big numbers, big infrastructure, again, preparedness, planning, and making sure, and maybe we'll talk about this in a minute, that the budget can support those things.
Daria Devlin is with us. We'll take our news break here at the bottom of the hour. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show, 4:30. Rolling along on a Monday from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here. It's the Joel Natale Show, having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. In studio is Daria Devlin. She is running for the Democratic primary for the office of the city of mayor. She is interested in the 5th floor. And Daria, this hour is gonna go so fast here. Part of the conversation is, themes from your campaign. We got to one of them, housing. Talk about some of the other things that you're really focusing in on.
Yeah, so 2 other really big ones. And Joel, it's all connected. So we talk about housing, we talk about jobs, we talk about, the city population. But, youth development is something that's always been really important to me. And when I say youth development, I just don't mean K-12 education. I mean early childhood, child care and those conversations we're having now. And I also mean, preparing our young people to have a place in our economy. I have 3 sons. 2 of them are down at Penn State, Maine, and I've got one that's going to go off to college next year. And for me, the dream is I want them to choose Erie.
Yeah.
Like I did, and I want them to choose it because they see themselves in the economy here and they want to have their own lives here. And I'm worried we don't have all those opportunities yet. So youth development all the way through is a huge issue for me.
One of the things that occurred to me when my kids were college age is, we could crank a bunch of them out of our own schools or wherever they're going to school in STEM type fields, yet we don't have the STEM jobs to keep them in Erie. And so I don't know how many engineers come out of Penn State Barron every year. My son was an engineer. There wasn't a gig here.
Yeah.
So he went to Indiana for the gig.
Absolutely. And, when we talk about attracting more family sustaining jobs and employers to Erie, they need to know that the talent is here for them to get employees.
It's a catch-22.
It's a catch-22. And, we talked early about leadership. In my mind, the mayor needs to squarely sit in those conversations with the superintendent of schools, with the head of the chamber, with the leaders in the business community, be like, okay, what are the jobs of tomorrow? Are we training our kids to make sure they can take advantage of those opportunities? It's a whole continuum. Erie's a small enough place. We can work together on these issues. So that issue of youth development really is a key one for me. And then the last one, that we've really focused on in our campaign is the budget. And, I want to say, the budget of the city of Erie is a real concern. It's a concern for me and it's a concern for others. I understand and recognize the mayor's done and city council has done some good work in dealing with the structural deficit we have, but it is still there. It is still significant. And 5 years from now, we're facing $12 to $15 million in structural deficit. And what I tell people is I've seen this movie when I was at the Erie School District. This is exactly where we were, in a terrible structural deficit that paralyzed us. In that case, the state came and helped us. The state's not coming here. They're not coming unless they're coming to take us over, which I think is the last thing most of us want. So we need to intervene now to make sure that we're addressing these budget issues.
All right. This is going to sound like a totally naive and unfair question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Okay. I'm trying to thread the logic that our budget continues to go up, yet our population served goes down. I know things are more expensive, but it's hard to justify.
Yes, but I mean, Joel, everything is more expensive.
Yes.
Personnel is more expensive. Benefits get more expensive. I mean, so many things in my mind are outside of the control of the city.
But is City Hall too big?
Well, I would say that parts of City Hall are too big. I'll tell you, the mayor's staff is much bigger than it was when he took over, just on the 5th floor. So I think there's some things to look at there for sure. But I'm actually less concerned about expenses and more concerned about revenue. We need to figure out how to bring more revenue into the city of Erie, and we need to do that without burdening our taxpayers any further, which really creates quite a problem. How are we going to do that? We've got to expand the tax base. That's why making sure our population is going up is so important. That's why the housing issue is so important, because we need more people to live in the city, to buy their homes, pay their property taxes. It spreads the burden out for everybody. That's where I really want to focus my efforts going into office.
Do you see that it would take some kind of public-private nonprofit partnership to bring in, I hate to use the word affordable housing, yet housing that is affordable. I mean, for that working person, that average per capita or per family income.
So it's two things. Again, it's the stock. It's the actual homes and apartments.
Right.
It's also who's going to live in them. So one really interesting thing that I want to talk more about in this campaign is working with our local employers to incentivize their employees to live in the city with us, right? So not a stick approach, but a carrot approach to say, can you, employer, UPMC, Erie Insurance, Gannon, smaller employers, can you provide an incentive to your employees? There is one employer in town who does this. He gives his employees who live in the city an extra $300 a month just so that they are living in the city and paying into that. What a fantastic idea. Why not scale that work? And, there's a lot of complaining how many nonprofits we have in the city. They don't pay
Right.
taxes. All right, let's sit down with those organizations and say, what can you do to help us? Can you incentivize your employees to live in the city, buy their homes, pay their taxes here? I think that's something we should explore. And that's how we start to get those revenue numbers up. Without, because you asked me about expenses, I really think that there's fiscal responsibility. I know there's places for cuts, but I don't think that's where we're really going to focus. We need to focus on the revenue side.
Talk about, and again, this has come up in the past, not so much more recently, but being able to maybe leverage our public safety infrastructure, some of our public works infrastructure, and farming that out to contiguous municipalities. I mean, we don't have to take over Lawrence Park and Wesleyville, but maybe we can make life easier for those taxpayers because we have a fire department right there on the edge of the city.
Now, I'll be honest with you. I'm most concerned about our taxpayers, right? So
Understood.
I want to make sure.
But I
that,
mean, if we were able to get some income that way,
absolutely. Maybe there's a fee for service model that
Right.
we could be looking at. Collaboration, taking those things to scale. That's where I really want to focus. And I think it's time to be innovative and creative, and again, solve these problems not in the same way we've done it before. Raise taxes, do cuts. Let's look at other ways. The Home Rule Charter has been proposed by some of council. I know the mayor's talked about it a little bit. This might be a way that we can think about, some additional kind of tax burden that gets us away from property taxes. So let's put everything on the table and let's really understand how to bring more revenue, get more people living in the city of Erie. It's better for all of us.
what is it about you and your personality and your capabilities that would make this work better?
Yeah, well, a couple of things, as I already mentioned. I am a problem solver and I don't shrink from a challenge. And I'm really willing to sit at a table and say, again, I don't have the answers. I want to surround myself with the people that really have the information, are good at their jobs, and we're going to figure this out together. And I really think I ask questions. I push the people around me. I've always done this in my career, people that I work with. I push them to say, what don't we know? Where can we be looking for these answers? They might not be here in Erie, but what else is happening in the region, in the state that we can go look for? I'm always been intellectually curious. I always want to go out and find those answers. Let's bring those in and make them work in Erie. I solve problems. And again, asking the questions and communicating clearly. To get everybody moving, we need a vision. We need to set a goal, have a vision, and get everybody moving in that direction. That goes from workers at City Hall to our nonprofits, to our local employers, to the schools, everything. I think if we articulate that vision for our community and really show everyone where their role is, and you put people in the right seats, that's how we start to get things done.
Do you think that the older individuals that are holding power will listen to you?
Well, Joel, I guess I would certainly ask why they would not listen to me. I'm a 48-year-old woman. I have been in Erie all my life. I know this city and every neighborhood. I've never shied away from a problem. I didn't leave this city when I could have, when I had other opportunities. I've given it my entire life. And, even in my time on the Erie School Board, I mean, my sons, myself, Erie's public schools, we've fought, we've worked to make sure, when our district was going through this financial crisis, I was leading the charge with communications and public relations. I've never stood away from that. I've always jumped in and helped. So I guess I'd ask the question, why not me? Why not these skills? I think I'm the right leader for the right time.
Let's talk about some structural issues as I see them here. We still have neighborhoods that are falling behind.
We do.
We have the legacy of redlining in this town.
Yes.
We had a big announcement today, which is so cool and so positive, of the opening of Erie Bank on Parade Street. Yet our neighbors in the Lower East Side, again, you grew up in the Lower East Side. You know this. I mean, how do we move forward?
Yeah. So a couple things. First, I was at the ribbon cutting today for the new bank on 10th and Parade. Kudos to everybody involved in that project. What a great thing for that community. So, a couple things there. First, when I did the Wayne School project over at ECAT, we used a new market tax credit tool that had not been used in our community. We figured that out. So I think one thing we need to do is let's find those new tools that we might not be using all the time. We can't just go to the Erie Community Foundation and Erie Insurance for every single thing that we need. We got to get a little more creative and look outside. So let's make sure we're using those tools. Second,
so CRIS is part of the solution, right?
Absolutely. And, I sit on that CRIS authority, and man, that could be a game changer for the community. We need to be careful. We need to make sure we do it correctly. We need to make sure we're involving the community in the decisions we're going to make. But $15 million a year, which is what we think is going to come in for 30 years, is really going to make a difference. So CRIS can be part of that. I think there's other tools out there as well. The other thing we need to do is we need to work better together. So you mentioned I grew up on the Lower East Side. My dad, Father Simon, started the Bayfront East Side Task Force, best to that organization down there. Of course, we have our West Bayfront over on the west side with Sisters of St. Joseph who are doing work in Little Italy, ESR over here on Parade Street. I have really been involved to try to get all of us to work better together. Shared service. How do we take this work that's right now happening in a very geographic scale in neighborhoods where we're doing a house or 2 or 3 a year? We need to get that to scale. We need to figure out a way where we're doing 100 a year throughout the entire city. So I think, again, that working better together, setting the vision and getting everybody around the table, I think we can do things a little bit differently that actually helps all of us. So that's another way where I really think we need to move forward if we're really going to solve these larger problems.
I mean, Buki said there were 6,000 housing properties that were threatened or in full-blown blight. And again, with all due respect to the Erie Redevelopment Authority, doing 30 a year doesn't seem like we'll be scratching that itch for a long time.
And Joel, that was 10 years ago that Buki said that. You know what I mean? So, where are we now? And that goes back to transparency, where we need to update a lot of that, inform the public where we are, what the goal still is. I haven't seen a lot of update. And before I came on today, I was listening to your show, and one thing I wanted to raise, it has been put in the media recently that Erie has the highest child poverty rate in all of the state of Pennsylvania. A third of our children a third of our school-age children are living below the poverty line, and we have the highest rate of the 10 largest cities in the state of Pennsylvania. How can we allow that in a community like this that is so well-resourced? We need to work better together on some of these large-scale issues. And by the way, that's not up to the nonprofits. Mm-hmm. United Way does good work, and Gary Horton was quoted. Of course, Gary does great work. Nonprofits are doing their job. It's time for the public sector, too, to take some leadership in some of these major issues on housing, on education, on youth development. That's the space. That's how we move the city forward.
But isn't there a threat of, blowing into other people's silos?
Look, it's bringing them together.
I mean, you're kind of in this weird, not weird, but unique position where you're on the school board, you're running for mayor, you're kind of bridging those massive two municipalities
Joel,
for the city.
How can that not be happening? Like, for me, it's more like, how are the city of Erie and the school district of the city of Erie not communicating on a regular basis about major issues? I think in Erie, we have been in silos for way too long, and we have now borne the fruit of that. And it's time to put a lot of that aside. No one's losing their job. We're not trying to push anybody out. We need to each do our jobs and do that in a coordinated fashion, again, to tackle these really big issues that we still face.
Are there some unique and fun things that we could do to stop brain drain? Again, you're talking about your kids. I'm thinking about the 4 universities that we have here in Erie County, which are equivalent to a D1 type of school. Yeah. And it's one of those things, as we talk to people that how they got here. Well, I went to Gannon and I stayed, or I went to Mercyhurst or Edinburgh, or so on. How do we do more of that in this modern era?
Yeah. So one thing, this is just one, but I think really we need to work on a creative district in our downtown. So, I went up and toured PACA, with Mark Tannenbaum. He reached out and said, will you come look? And, Mark's telling me about his vision of buying additional properties up there and having more community theater and making sure there's kind of like some funky, cool places. Like I go to the West Side Market area in Cleveland and it's kind of gritty and it's, a little fun. It's like, Why can't we have some of this here? Create those districts where younger people feel like there's a ton to do. There's not just one or two nice restaurants, or maybe, maybe the Warner and the Phil, but we've got a whole wide variety of activities and spaces and places. A lot of that focused on the arts. That's, I think, really key for us. And I'm going to say one more thing, our Bayfront. If we don't figure out how to take this pearl of our community and transform it into what we all know it can be, we are missing out. That Bayfront is the key to making sure that we have a strong, vibrant community. We need to get more creative and get together on that issue.
Well, again, you're dealing with the Erie events. You're dealing with the Port Authority. Does the mayor have a bully pulpit in that?
Here's what I'll say again. Then the mayor needs to sit everybody down at the table and say, okay, folks, this is too important for us to be in silos.
There's no doubt. One of the things that I'll say is that you're coming out of a beautiful concert with the Philharmonic at the Warner, and what do you see in your eyesight is a bottle shop or a beauty supply store. Is there anything we can do about firming up our central core on aesthetics and what did Shana, you call it, the 62,000 gigawatts signage for the skill games locations?
Now, look, I mean, small business owners are the heart of our community,
Understood.
so I don't want to take anything away from some of those folks who are making their living, but can we be a little smarter about how we're doing zoning and how we're doing land use and where those places are going? For example, I'm not really sure we should have vape shops right in walking distance of our schools. Like we have that over on East Avenue, again, on the east side. Sometimes that's what we get, and that's not okay for our kids and our family.
Right.
So we can make better decisions, again, more collaborative, more coordinated, and again, we want to have small business owners, but we want to make sure we're keeping our folks safe as well.
I just got a couple more minutes with Daria Devlin here, who's running for the Democratic race. What do you think? You've had some significant announcements of money raised, your signatures for your petitions. I'm just going to say it, and please don't take offense, but one of the things that happens with the mayor's race is that you get a lot of support of people that live on the other side of Pittsburgh, Byrd, and Grandview. And yet you have to activate the people that live within the 6 wards of Erie. What's your strategy?
Man, Joel, that is such a great point. And when I was, I have been thinking about running for 2 years. And I've been having conversations and, I would talk to people and they're like, yeah, you're the right person. You need to go. And I'm like, do you live in the city? Do you live in the city? Do you live in the city?
Right.
That's all very kind and nice, and I'll take your financial contributions. But unless you have a vote, it's really not that important to me. I need the voters. So the next step of that was to go find those voters. And we are already knocking on doors, Joel. We are already hitting a couple different wards in the city of Erie, and we're getting great response as we're going up to people. And they're saying things like, you know what, you're right. It is time for change. You know what, you're right. I do see these issues. I like you. You seem like you've got a lot of energy. I've seen you on the news. So yes, in the beginning, that was my concern too, but I'll tell you, I'm seeing it, and I want to be clear. I'm going to work for every single one of these votes. And if we have to hit every single door and go into every single ward, I want to have as many conversations as we have, because of course the mayor is a 2-term incumbent.
Right.
He's got a ton of name recognition. Everybody knows who he is. And so if it takes that for me to hit every block and knock on as many doors as I can, I am going to do that, because I want to convince the voters that I am their person and that I'm going to lead us forward.
Does it look like it's just going to be mano a mano?
So far, I mean, we'll see. As you noted, petitions were just pulled. We've already filed, so we're on the ballot. But I haven't heard of anyone else. Okay. So for right now, the only 2 in the primary I know are me and Joe Schember.
If I sat both of you down here, what would be the biggest question you would want to ask the mayor?
What I would want to ask the mayor? Yeah. I guess I would ask him, Joel, because he has said publicly he wants to run for a 3rd term because he's got so much left to do. And I really want to understand what that is and why it hasn't already been done. So when I read his op-eds in the paper, and he keeps saying we have so much to do, I don't get a lot of details. And I'll be honest with you, I met with him a couple years ago now, and we talked about the issue of population decline. And I hear him saying the right things. He says things like, we need more people to live in the city. We need to address these issues. But I don't hear the plans. I don't see the action. And that's what I would ask him. Mr. Mayor, we agree what needs to be done. How are you going to do it? And why haven't you done it already?
We're going to leave it there. Daria Devlin running for the Democratic nomination for mayor. Again, if all history tells itself, this mayor's race would be, basically decided in May, on May 20th, because we haven't had a Republican. Well, at least I think I was, a toddler.
The 60s. That's what I hear. The 60s. Yes.
when Williamson was a mayor. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. It is 5 minutes in front of 5 o'clock.